All right, welcome back. This is One Israel News. It's 14 December, and I'm going to, the war seems to be going pretty good. We're kicking Hamas's ass. I mean, there was no doubt about that. This is why all this desperation is going on around the world, in the third world, in the Arab world, to get a ceasefire. And then they're applying all kinds of pressure to the Biden White House to stop the war. And you gotta think about that. So if the war stops, what happens? Well, we just go back to where we were before October 7th, just waiting for the next Hamas attack after they've had time to rearm, rebuild, and retrain their new soldiers to go kill more Jews. So we're right back to where we started before. It solves nothing. It goes on and on and on and on. It never ends. Constant bloodshed, and you got the Gaza Strip has the highest birth rate of any society in the world. That means they're popping out babies as fast as they can get martyred, okay? And you have videos of women that are willing to give their children over to Hamas so they can die and become martyrs. So it's an endless cycle. And it's just like an addiction. An addict's just going to keep going and drinking and shooting up and getting high as much as they can until the cycle's broken. And it's either broken a couple of ways. It's either they go to jail, they get treatment and stop, or they die. And, well, I can't see Hamas, these murderous, rapists, and baby killers reforming themselves and becoming model citizens. So that ain't going to happen. And some of them may surrender and go to jail, but the vast majority are going to die, which they should. It's always amazing to me, these assholes, especially on the left, and I'm a lefty, okay, center left, but the far left people, if innocent children were getting murdered somewhere around the world, say in Burma, and they were running for their lives, or Sudan, you'd have all these lefties screaming at the top of their lungs that why isn't the U.S. doing something? This is how we got involved in Somalia, okay? Why is the U.S. sitting back silent while little African kids, it must be because the U.S. is racist, because it's little African kids, well, they don't care. So they're not going to do anything, and so they put the pressure on for us to send in the Marines to feed the Somalis. Remember that? Remember how that ended? Mogadishu and all that crap? So, anywhere around the world, there are people being murdered, raped, starved to death, tortured, killed by their governments or whoever. Oh, and you remember how many bleeding heart liberals open up Sweden, open up the UK, open up France, open up Germany to all these poor Arabs from Syria that are getting bombed to death. By who? The Russians, right? Remember, the Russians and the Syrians are bombing and gassing them. So we opened up our doors, and then what do we have? Those same fuckers running around calling for jihad to destroy Israel and destroy the West. The same people we invited in, right? But when it comes to Jews, they can be murdered. The women can be raped. Jewish babies can be decapitated and killed. And no one lifts a finger. No one, That's what you get. That's the karma you get for the occupation, right? Bullshit. You know. But now they want to cease fire because supposedly that's going to solve everything. That's not going to solve a damn thing. Can you imagine as if the Allied armies, the British and the Americans and the French, were right on the banks of the Rhine River, just about to take a bridge and go into Germany, that all of a sudden the lefties of the world started hammering their governments. Oh no, you got to stop the killing of the poor innocent Germans. All these German children being killed in the fire bombings. You know, if we had stopped at the Rhine River, would Europe be democratic today? Would there be an EU? Probably not. Probably not. Because what would happen is the Russians would have rolled all the way to the Rhine River to make sure that the fucking Germans didn't come, the Nazis didn't come back. And then we'd have had Russia right on the doorstep, the Soviet Union right on the doorstep of France. Because Russians, they knew what was in store with the Nazis. They lost, 30 million people? 10% of their population to the Nazis. And it always gets me that the people who don't have to face the consequences of demanding a ceasefire, the people who they sit back in their ivory towers, in their comfortable offices, in their nice little homes in the suburbs, in this condo skyrises, and they don't have to face the consequences of living next door to a bunch of bloodthirsty murderers. And it wasn't just Hamas, folks. All those Palestinians, unarmed Palestinians, come running through the fences, looting and beating Jews that were being brought back. How many of those Palestinian children were beating on that dead girl's corpse as they drove her through the town square? Beating on a dead girl. She's already dead. Her limp body lying in the back of the truck, and a bunch of 10-year-olds are hitting her. So it's not just Hamas. It's a whole society of murderers. And I know a lot of people, they're not all murderers. They're all they're hospitable and da-da-da. It's the occupation that made them that way. The occupation made them into fucking murderers. Well, if that's the case, then you should have had 6 million fucking murdering Jews running around Europe seeking vengeance and killing every fucking German, because the Holocaust, in your logic, would have made them into murderers, and you should have just stepped back and say, it's because of the Holocaust, and the Nazis and the Germans are getting back what they put out. Karma, right? They should have just stepped back and let the rest of the Jews that were left over slaughter 80 million Germans, right? And that's your logic. Bullshit. Bullshit. Wrong is wrong no matter what happens, okay? We don't allow people that have been beaten up, shot at, raped, to go in and kill and torture and abuse the people that have committed a crime on them. Now, do we? No. Although in some cases I think we should. You got a child murderer. The kid's been killed. He's been gone to court, got his day in court, his due process, and he's been convicted. Let him in the room for an hour with the family members. Just an hour. And if he survives, then send him to prison. But yet, and then They keep bringing up this dead corpse of a peace solution called the two-state solution. And, I used to be for a two-state solution. But you can't have a two-state solution living side by side to a bunch of fucking murderers. Essentially what the world is wanting is for Israel to live in the same house with Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy and Charles Manson and put up with it. And you guys stop fussing around and stop messing around and get to peace, right? Like somehow, if we magically create these two states, that there's magic, this flower of peace is going to sprout, and it's going to be like, oh, this is so, why didn't we do this before? It's so fucking wonderful. Well, we've had a two-state solution for a long time, at least since 2007. Israel completely withdrew from the Gaza in 2005. Hamas took over in 2007 or 2006. So we've had a two-state solution, them controlling their own destiny for a long time. Did it bring peace? No. All we got was more rockets, more terror, and more killing. So this dream of a two-state solution is dead. It's not dead because Israel killed it. It's dead because the Palestinians never wanted it. They never wanted a two-state solution. Okay? When you had a two-state solution back in 1947 with the UN resolution of an Arab state and a Jewish state, the Arabs rejected it. In every case, they have always rejected a two-state solution. So it's not because, don't blame it on the Jews, it's the Arabs. And the people who think, because in their mind, this is what's logical and this seems to be what might work, doesn't mean that the Arabs accept that. They'll play the game to get the money, but they're always playing the game. You don't keep saying in 2023, from the river to the sea, if you want to live in peace side by side with your neighbor. It's bullshit. The people who want to live in side by side that are Arabs, very, very small minority. Very small. You have to go with the reality of what we're dealing with. The vast majority of Palestinians want to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews. That's just the reality. Okay? Wake up. Stop trying to force down Israel's throat its own suicide, because you know what you're going to get? You're going to get a lot of fighting back. Okay? We've gone down this bullshit road for 30 years. The Oslo Accord happened in 1993. And it never brought the peace that was promised. Because the reason why is the Arabs never wanted it. They never wanted it. They never wanted a two-state solution. They wanted us dead. The sooner you understand that, the better off the world will be. Anyway, so I didn't mean to go on a rant here, but this episode I'm actually going to be talking about something completely different, because the war in Gaza is going to take its course. There's nothing I can do to affect it. It's going to keep going on until they're wiped out. Okay? At least that's what I'm hoping. Until Hamas is wiped out. I can't affect that. So I'm going to talk about other topics. But what I do want to recommend is that if you're not subscribed to Michael Rappaport on Instagram, I highly recommend him. Great stuff. Great stuff. Also, he is on Twitter X. Now, also, I would recommend, but not to believe his bullshit, would be John Cusack's side. Because Michael Rappaport is pretty mainstream down the middle. Not right-wing at all. But even he sees the reality of what's going on. But you got John Cusack, who runs around. You remember the guy from Say Anything and, Grosse Point Blank, where he plays an assassin? All these movies, and he's running around screaming about the Israeli genocide of the Palestinians. Completely unhinged. So if you want to read what the lefties and the pro-Palestinian groups are up to, read John Cusack. Completely unhinged, completely delusional, completely off the cuff, okay? I'm a lefty, left of center Jew. I'm not a right-winger. I don't like Bibi Netanyahu. Matter of fact, my next part of this video is going to show you how left I am about it, okay? But even I supported a two-state solution up until October 7th. But reality hits you in the face, and then you just realize it's just not going to work. It's like, I knew this couple, and they supposedly loved each other, but every time you got them together, it was like fucking cats and dogs fighting all the time, and I just got tired of dealing with them. So I stopped dealing with them. Eventually, a year or two, it took them another year or two, they broke up because they realized I was right. I could see it long before they could, but they couldn't. Eventually they broke up and were happier finding someone else. So this is the thing, is that people like John Cusack have, there's people that just have their own stamped in, molded in their mind philosophy. And then they look at the world and they rant and rave and try to make the world fit their philosophy of life and the way they see things. And that's not the way the world works. The world's not going to accommodate you because you're delusional. The world's not going to accommodate your point of view just because you make a fucking Twitter post every 5 minutes. Okay? That's not the way the world works. You have to look at the world the way it really is and then deal with it. You can't mold and force the world into being to fit your philosophy. That's like borderline schizophrenic delusional. And this is what's happened to John Cusack. He's been this extreme left-wing person at least since the 90s, and he's put his money where his mouth is and his mouth where his money is, and he hasn't changed a fucking thing. Not one thing has he changed in the world. Not one. The Arabs still hate us. No matter how many ceasefires he calls for, they're going to be waking up tomorrow wanting to kill us. And there's nothing that John Cusack Twitter post is going to change that. Nothing. Okay? So, if you want to know what the delusional left pro-Palestinian wing is believing, read John Cusack. So there's two there. Now, I want to go on to a topic that has always bothered me, and bothered me in Israel, is Jonathan Pollard. Now, Jonathan Pollard, we all know, I'm going to read about what he did. He was a spy. He worked as a civilian in Suitland at the Navy archives there. Processing, I don't know what he was processing, but processing classified documents. He had a clearance. when he signed up, he did background checks, went through training, signed all kinds of documents saying he would agree never to release or disclose any of the information that he had gone over. He made a promise to the American people. His word. Okay? He made an oath to follow the Constitution, to obey the law, and to not break his oath. But he did. And not only did he didn't just give a few bits of paper, he gave more documents to people that weren't authorized to see them than any ever spy in American history. Ever. Room full. If you took the documents, little pieces of paper, and stacked them in a room from, floor to ceiling, multiple stacks, it would cover an entire large one-bedroom apartment. Massive amounts of documents. Now, in the oath, it doesn't say, oh, well, you can break your oath as long as it's an ally of the United States. As long as you don't give it to an enemy. If you give it to an ally, it's okay. No, it's nowhere in there does it say that. And he knew this. It's not like he handed over some documents and then, oh, I didn't know, I wasn't supposed to do that. He knew what he was doing. He purposely sought out Colonel Sela of the Israeli Air Force to a friend and to give him documents. And Colonel Sela was very, very disturbed by this because he thought he was being set up by the FBI, by the intelligence services, to entrap him, and then they could use him as a spy against Israel. So he went very, very careful with that. And Pollard had actually tried to contact the Mossad, and the Mossad had rejected him because he was unstable, unreliable. So he went another way. He tried to get in with military intelligence. Military intelligence, they rejected him. The only organization that accepted him was this research organization that was a separate spy organization. It's now been disbanded. Was to get technology, specifically nuclear technology, and it was headed by Rafi Eitan. So Jonathan Pollard broke his security oath. He knew he did it on purpose. It wasn't like it was an accident. It wasn't a one-time thing. He did it on purpose because he said, he thought that Israel wasn't getting the intelligence that it deserved and that it should be getting. But the thing is that Jonathan Pollard was not in the position to know what type of intelligence Israel was getting. Okay? He couldn't make that assessment because he didn't know the paperwork that's going back and forth between our intelligence services and their intelligence services in the liaison. Okay? He made a judgment that that's, and I don't even believe that's the real reason. I think the real reason he did it was to make a name for himself, to be famous. He came up with this idea later that the U.S. was purposely holding back intelligence from Israel. And guess what, Jonathan? You know what? The U.S. has every right to hold back intelligence from Israel if it chooses to do that, because that's U.S. intelligence, okay? And if the U.S. intelligence community felt that Israel shouldn't be privy to that type of information, that's within their right to do that. Okay? You know, I always use the thing like this. If I got a friend that got wealthy and, you know, we both grew up together and he just got lucky and got wealthy, got a new car and a trophy wife and a brand new house and had a lot of money sitting around, does that give me the right when he comes, oh, come on over to my house and have dinner, that when I'm in his house, to steal his gold ashtrays, to steal something from his house because, oh, he's rich? If he was my friend, he would have shared that with me anyway. To go to his room and take $1,000 from his wallet? Friends don't treat friends like that. Okay? This is why Mossad rejected him. But because Rafi Eitan was trying to make a name for himself in this no-name agency, he let him in. He made Jonathan Pollard their spy. So Jonathan Pollard, just the real quick summary, he gave thousands of documents to Rafi Eitan. Basically, they set up a safe house. Every Friday he would take home a big suitcase full of documents, go over to the safe house, drop off the documents. They would sit there and copy it all weekend. He would come back Sunday evening, pick up the suitcase, bring it back in on Monday. He got caught because he was sloppy. He was leaving documents, classified documents, all over his desk, unsecured, at his house. Documents were dropping out of his suitcase. He was a bumbling fool and an idiot. Unprofessional. And he got busted. And rightly he should have. And he had dragged his wife, Anne, into the whole mess and given her documents so she could sell and get some influence to some Chinese clients that she was trying to get some business with. So not only was he selling to the Israelis, he was selling to the Chinese, the Pakistanis, and the South Africans. So it wasn't just about helping Israel. He's a scumbag. He took an oath. You know, if any private or lieutenant had have done one of the documents, just one, that Jonathan Pollard had done, they would have gone to jail for 5-10 years, just for one document. Jonathan Pollard had thousands of documents. The only person who came close to having unauthorized, outside from where they should have been, top secret documents was Donald Trump. That's the only other person who even came close to having that amount of classified documents was Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is a traitor and shared those documents with the Russians and the Chinese and should fucking go to jail or be executed. Jonathan Pollard should have been executed as a spy. He should have been, and if not, he should have never got out. The reason he was in jail for 30 years is because he made a deal, a plea bargain, that even though he had thousands of documents, he agreed that to plea to having one document, and he was going to get 5 years. He would have been out in 3 years on probation. But what he did is he violated the terms to the judge, and the judge told him no interviews with the media. And what did he do? As soon as he got the plea deal, he made a interview with Wolf Blitzer from prison, which totally enraged the Attorney General, the prosecutor, and the judge, because that was a violation of his plea agreement. His plea agreement was no interviews with the media. And not only did he do interviews with the media, he told the media what he stole. So he laid out there for all our enemies to hear what we have. And now, what we've been compromised for. And now the Israelis have it. And guess what? You don't think that the Russians would have started applying pressure to the refuseniks and to, other Jews in Russia, and maybe entrapping other Israelis to exchange for that classified information that Jonathan Pollard gave to the Israelis, now that Israel has something to bargain with them? Natan Saransky rotting in a prison, okay, along with a lot of other Jewish refuseniks, and then they get released within a few years within like 2 years after Jonathan Pollard gave him all that information. Guess what? The Israelis, okay, let me let you in on a little secret, folks. Each country does what's best for the interests of that country, just like you do what's best for the interests of your family, to protect your family. So, as much as the U.S. is an ally to Israel, on top of that, above that, is Israel's commitment to Jews around the world, to protect them and to bring them home. Okay? So they're going to do whatever they have to do with whatever assets they have to secure that, even if it means betraying our own ally. Okay? And I'm going to tell you here, in case you didn't hear me before, I was born in America. I'm a Jew. And I live in Israel. I have an Israeli passport. And Jonathan Pollard is a son of a traitorous, two-faced, lying son of a bitch. Okay? So I can't tell you, when I first moved to Israel in 2007, I would walk down King George right past the Prime Minister's home. Okay? It turns into Karen Ha Yesud. Okay? And right there is a little park, a fountain. And so the city council of Jerusalem had decided, well, we're going to name this park after Jonathan Pollard because he's still in prison. Okay? So they put up a big placard, Jonathan Pollard Park. And I had to walk past that as I walked to the American Cultural Center, as I went to work, whatever. Every day, I wanted to take a baseball bat and knock the fucking shit out of that goddamn sign. But I didn't, because all around there's all these cameras. Okay, because it's near the Prime Minister's residence. So, every day, I'd have to control my temper not to destroy that sign. Because I'm a Jew, and I went in the military in 87. And guess what, folks? Jews who went in the military after Jonathan Pollard got a little extra scrutiny, a little extra background checks, a couple of pulled aside for a couple of interviews. You're a Jew? You're born in America, right? Yeah. Who are you loyal to? United States or Israel? I never told anyone I was a Jew in the military because of fucking Jonathan Pollard. Dual loyalty, my friend. My commanding officer knew I was a Jew. And they would make comments. Well, I don't hope we don't have another Jonathan Pollard here. Can we trust you with this? Little snide fucking anti-Semitic comments. All because of fucking Jonathan Pollard. They're going to give me a classified document in a sealed envelope and have me walk it down the hall, down another corridor, to S2. And my fucking captain would say, hey, don't forget you're an American. So that's the kind of shit I had to deal with after Jonathan fucking Pollard. You know, thank God he lives over in East Jerusalem, because if I see his son of a bitch ass walking around anywhere, Ben Yehuda Street, King George, on the fucking train, I'm kicking the fucking shit out of you, Jonathan Pollard, for the shit that you put American Jews through unnecessarily because you're a traitorous, lying son of a bitch. So, I wear hiking boots everywhere, my friend. So you better stay the fuck out of West Jerusalem, or you're going to meet the tail end of my heel in your fucking face. So let's get into you, Jonathan Pollard, and figure out how much of a liar you are. Now, the right wing likes to make you out like you're some great fucking Jewish Zionist hero, but you and I know the truth, right? Right, Jonathan? You and I know the reality that you're nothing but a glory-seeking, lying, traitorous son of a bitch. Okay? Being used by the right-wing media. Okay? And the right-wing groups in Israel. So, let's get into it. Oh, and let me explain also that I'm not just some lefty bashing on the rightists. That, you know, there's a guy named Mordecai Vanunu who broke his oath in Israel and took pictures inside the nuclear power plant where we make our nuclear weapons in Israel and betrayed his oath and went to the newspapers and gave them the pictures that he had taken and broken his oath and his security clearance. And he got caught and imprisoned in Israel, and they tried to make him out on the left as some poor victim of the fascist state of Israel, and he's nothing but a lying, traitorous son of a bitch, no better than Jonathan Pollard. And again, the same warning applies to you, Vanunu, because you're in, what, Jaffa? If I'm walking around Tel Aviv or Jaffa and I see your son, lying, traitorous son of a bitch face, again, I wear hiking boots everywhere. You're going to get a fucking hiking boot of my heel in your fucking face. Okay? So I got one for Jonathan, and I got Pollard, and I got one for traitor Jonathan Pollard, and I got one for traitor Mordecai Vanunu. So just to show you, I'm not biased against just the right wing. Okay? I'm biased against liars and traitors. So again, Jonathan, stay the fuck out of West Jerusalem. And Mordecai Vanunu, stay the fuck out of Tel Aviv. Okay? Alright. So, Jonathan Pollard. There's that lying, traitorous, weasel, scumbag Jonathan Pollard right there. Jonathan J. Pollard, born 7 August 1954, is an American former intelligence analyst who was jailed for spying for Israel. In 1984, Pollard sold numerous closely guarded state secrets, including National Security Agency's 10-volume manual on how the U.S. gathers its signal intelligence, and disclosed the names of thousands of people who cooperated with U.S. intelligence agencies. So personally, that is the fault of the U.S. intelligence services of having all that open, no matter what kind of fucking intelligence clearance you have. That should be more compartmentalized. Anyway, he was apprehended in 1985 and was subsequent proceedings agreed to a plea deal, pleaded guilty to spying for and providing top secret classified information to Israel. Pollard admitted shopping the services successfully in some cases to other countries like Pakistan, South Africa, and China. In 1987, he was arrested. He was sentenced to life in prison for violations of the Espionage Act. The Israeli government acknowledged a portion of its role in Pollard's espionage in 1987 and issued a formal apology to the U.S., but did not admit to paying him until 1998. Over the course of his imprisonment, Israeli officials, U.S. Israeli activist groups, and some U.S. politicians continually lobbied for reduction of or commutation of his sentence. Hold on one second. It says the Israeli government acknowledged a portion of the role. Oh, actually, excuse me. I just passed that. In defense of his actions, Pollard said the American intelligence establishment collectively endangered Israel's security by withholding crucial information. And that could be true, or it may not be true. But a lowly fucking intelligence analyst in the Navy Department wasn't in a position to make that call. Okay? Not at all. Okay? It's like, me being a street cop going in and saying, hey, this murder investigation is completely off because they don't know what they're talking about. The detectives are lying and letting this guy get off scot-free, whatever. Well, that person wouldn't know what the hell they're talking about. Okay? All right. So, I used to know this guy that would say shit about staying in your lane, knowing your limits. If you don't know or have the clearance or have the need to know, stay in your own fucking lane, Pollard. Anyway. It says opposing any form of clemency were many active and retired U.S. officials, including Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, former CIA Director George Tenet, several former U.S. Secretaries of Defense, a bipartisan group of U.S. congressional leaders, and members of the intelligence community. I think I also seem to remember Joe Biden was completely against Jonathan Pollard getting any kind of leniency. They maintain the damage to U.S. and national security due to Pollard's espionage was far more severe, wide-ranging, and enduring than publicly acknowledged. And see, that's the thing. When you have all this classified information that gets out, you can't go running around saying, oh, this is what he disclosed and this is how damaging it is. Because basically that gives away to the enemy how you've been damaged, what you've been damaged, and they know what to look for. Okay? So this is why there's a lot of fucking ignorant people out there that said, oh, he just gave away a few documents. Bullshit. Massive amounts of documents. And again, when you have a separate country who has its own agenda and priorities that don't always align with the U.S., okay, they're going to use whatever tools they have in their tool bag to secure the release of, Israelis that are in Russian Soviet prisons, refuseniks. It doesn't take much. All they have to do is an Israeli go out to dinner, and then they arrest him, plant something on him, throw him in jail, and say, we're not going to release this guy until you cough up something for us. And so the Israelis would be forced to cough up something. And guess what they're going to cough up? Whatever the Russians ask for. And they're not going to be really crying too hard or thinking too much about U.S. intelligence and U.S. assets being lost or killed when it's one of their guys on the line. I'll put it to you this way. If someone has kidnapped your child and they say, hey, we'll give you back your child, all you have to do is give up this person who's your friend. Well, that friend isn't blood. You may be friends, but that's not your child. So guess what you're going to do? You're going to give up your fucking friend to get your child back. If you're any kind of father. Okay? So this is the reality we deal with, and the naivety of the people who run around apologists for Pollard going, hey, he didn't give Israel what they shouldn't have already gotten. Nah. Well, that's not his call. Okay? You don't let the janitor run the fucking corporation. Okay? If the janitor doesn't like what the CEO for Amazon is doing, go find another fucking job. Okay? It's that simple. Pollard was a fucking janitor. Anyway. And I don't like this other narrative they try to put out there that, oh, well, if you're against Pollard, then you're against Israel. Bullshit. If he loved Israel so much, why didn't he fucking make aliyah to Israel? Okay? He never even contacted an Israeli until he gave the information away. He'd been to Israel once for a summer camp. Put your money where your fucking mouth is. Put your body where your mouth is. And go join the IDF, fucking Pollard. They didn't do that. Because they don't take fucking fat, lying, lazy son of a bitches like him, okay? Anyway. Alright. Though Pollard argued that he only supplied Israel with information critical to its security, opponents stated he had no way of knowing what the Israelis had received from legitimate exchanges, and that much of the data he compromised had nothing to do with Israel's security. Pollard revealed aspects of U.S. intelligence gathering process, its sources and methods. In 1995, while in prison, he was granted Israeli citizenship. Okay, and I'll just put it to you this way. Okay? Israel's a separate country. If Israel commits a war crime, that means some of their soldiers kill people, and this happens everywhere. There were American soldiers that killed people in Vietnam, American soldiers that killed people, innocent civilians, in World War II and in Japan. So, if the Israelis commit a war crime and are covering it up, Israel's intelligence gathering against Israel, America's intelligence gathering against Israel could be compromised by that information. Anyway, Pollard was released November 20th, 2015 in accordance with federal guidelines in place at the time of his sentencing. On November 20th, 2020, his parole expired and all restrictions were removed. On December 30th, 2020, Pollard and his second wife moved to Israel and settled in Jerusalem. And she died. So poor Anne, his first wife, got cancer and was sick during the trial. And he divorced her, or she divorced him. And then he married this other woman he never met from prison. And then as soon as he got to Israel, she died within a year. And then he ran off. He's like 69. And he ran off and married this, 30-year-old woman who had like 7 kids. So he's very much a creep. Anyway. Yeah, see, there's the little creepo pedophile. See his wife right there? She's like 30-something. And see, he's such a creep and he's so extreme that back when the families of the kidnapped hostages, were out there protesting to the government to make sure, put pressure on them to get the hostages out, Jonathan Pollard's out there telling them they should shut up and that the government should arrest them. But no, it was okay for 30 years for people to protest against him being in jail and in prison, to free him. But no, the families, according to Pollard and his warped logic, should be quiet. This is before also the hold on one second. And this is before the latest hostage exchange. It said Jonathan Pollard, who spent 30 years in prison on espionage charges and was released in light of intensive public and diplomatic efforts, called the families of hostages to be silenced, including the imprisonment in a video with Macron Shiloh on Wednesday. So not only is he a hypocrite, because there are plenty of people that were protesting for him for 30 years to get out of prison. Nobody tried to silence them. But also he's undemocratic, doesn't believe in democracy. Welcome to democracy, Mr. Pollard, that people that, even that you don't like, have a right to speak and express their views, And that this is the whole right-wing mentality. It's a fascist mentality that thinks that either you agree with us and support us, or you're against Israel, you're against the state. And that's the thing, is that the right wing doesn't seem to understand that they are not the state and the state is not them. Pollard called the ceasefire and hostage release deal a monstrous blunder. Oh, really? Well, tell that to the families who got at least 40 of their grandmothers, children, daughters out alive. Because we all know that the majority of the remaining hostages are probably going to be killed by Hamas. So at least that's some that got out. But you have these crazies like Pollard, you know, who for 30 years make a deal to get me out, but don't make a deal to get the hostages in Gaza out. What a hypocrite. When we declared war, the first thing that the government should have done was declare a state of national emergency and told all the hostages' families, you will keep your mouth shut or we will shut them for you. Total fascist. You don't tell that to people who are suffering, whose family members have been taken hostage. Are you insane? Nobody told people to shut up about getting you out of jail for 30 fucking years. Said Pollard to Rabbi David Bar Hayim, you will not interfere in our management of this war. And see how he makes it like now he's part of the government? He seems to have this bizarre notion that now he's part of the government. He's an elected official in the government. Is that what he's saying? And he's not. He's just a fucking nobody. You will not interfere in our management of this war. Wow. You will not be used by the international community or by our own leftists who manage the Gilad Shalit deal as a weapon against us. If that means imprisoning to silence certain members of the hostage families, then so be it. See, that's insanity. That's a mentally disturbed person right there who can call... Okay, you got people... So not only have they suffered under the murderers of Hamas, and their family members have been killed and captured and taken prisoner, but now he wants the government to go in and make them suffer even more because they're speaking out and imprison them. That's total fascist insanity. This is the kind of wingnut we have to deal with here. Let's listen to this YouTube video. Oh God. It's 27 minutes. Here. We'll listen to this over here. The release of the spy to the posters. The released spy referred to the posters of hostages being held by Hamas as poison darts in our ability to wage total war against our enemy. Good Lord. Jonathan Pollard has emerged as an influential figure in Israel since his release from prison in 2015. Pollard compared the situation with the hostages to a submarine, which is damaged and the captain is forced to seal off a section with people in it in order to save the rest of the vessel. Well, it's not that bad, Jonathan. Come on. Pollard added that while he was in prison, he opposed a proposal by the U.S. to release him in exchange for Israel releasing Palestinian prisoners as a gesture to the Palestinian Authority. But no. He wasn't against a deal with what was that, the Try deal, that the Russians would release American spies to America. America would release Pollard to Israel, and Israel would release Palestinians to Russia or something like that, right? Wasn't that the deal? I remember. Anyway, Pollard added that, Pollard warns Hamas, U.S. will force end of war after hostage release. Now, he's probably right about that. All right. So, hold on one second. All right, so let's watch a little bit of this video here. Oh, that's the picture, excuse me. Well, he definitely didn't lose any weight in prison. He's still a fat line fuck. All right.
What is your opinion Jonathan, of the recently brokered so-called hostage deal between Israel and Hamas? Do you consider it to be a mistake? Do you consider it to have been unavoidable? Or a disaster, perhaps? And if it is a mistake, what would you have done?
This was not a mistake. It was a monstrous blunder. And I'm going to say something that I know is very controversial right now, but I must say it nonetheless. If I had a son or daughter in the army right now in Gaza, I would want them home. Leave. Put your gun down and come home. Why? The casualties that we are incurring right now are pointless. The future is quite discernible.
Huh. Hold on one second.
What is your opinion, Jonathan, of the recently brokered so-called hostage deal between Israel and Hamas? Do you consider it to be a mistake? Do you consider it to have been unavoidable? Or a disaster, perhaps? And if it is a mistake, what would you have done?
This was not a mistake. It was a monstrous blunder. And I'm going to say something that I know is very controversial right now, but I must say it nonetheless. If I had a son or daughter in the army right now in Gaza, I would want them home. Leave. Put your gun down and come home. Why? The casualties that we are incurring right now are pointless. The future is quite discernible. We will not be allowed to destroy Hamas. As I wrote in several pieces, published pieces, Hamas's game plan, and the game plan of the Americans and the Europeans, is to drag out the hostage exchange process to such an extent that they wear us down. They will have the opportunity to reorganize, rearm, reequip, reposition.
You see, I agree with what he's saying there, but that's the thing. Nobody knows the future. Their probabilities, I'd say if they keep going like they're going now and don't keep the pressure on Biden, this will come true. But if we keep the pressure on the White House to allow them to destroy Hamas, and they keep pushing to do it in the next 2-3 weeks, we can finish them. But we have to keep the pressure on to allow the government to do its job, to the IDF to do its job. Now, I am going to say that after 14 years of Bibi, it's to his benefit not to destroy Hamas, to allow them to continue in some form, because as long as you have that threat out there, you need Bibi. If Hamas is destroyed, you don't need Bibi. You don't need Likud. Okay? If your pest control guy comes by and wipes out the roaches and the pests in your house, you don't need a pest control guy all the time. Okay? But if he only wipes out 75% of them, he's guaranteed to get business and to stay in business, right? Same thing with Bibi. Bibi has nothing to offer. He has no plan for the future. It's only about his power. Okay? So, in a sense, Jonathan Pollard is 100% correct there. But I think we can destroy Hamas if given the opportunity. We need to keep the pressure on. and keep at it. And frankly, the IDF just needs to lightning strike before January 1st all the way down to Rafah. Because if they get engaged so much, intertwined with the Palestinians all the way to Rafah, there's no way a ceasefire would work and everyone would be able to see that. So what they need to do is lightning strike all the way down, all of Gaza, all the way to Rafah. We may take more casualties, but a ceasefire will be impossible.
And worst of all, I said several weeks ago that the Americans in particular and the Europeans will use the quiet to move in humanitarian aid representatives, which will prevent us from doing any military activity for fear of hitting a French doctor or an American aid worker. And now, today, I have proof of that, where the French now have said they're going to move a hospital, a field hospital, into Khan Yunis. Khan Yunis? Yeah. How are we supposed to maneuver around that? Well, we aren't. That's the whole point. I will never, and I know it's dangerous to say never, but I will never vote for the religious Zionist party, ever. Ever. And I have friends, good friends, like Orot Struk and even Bezalel Smotrich and Simcha Rotman. Their decision, I don't care. I've heard Orot Struk's bizarre justification, rationalization for what they did. It's poppycock. I don't know what she's smoked or drunk or what she's been told, but it rings hollow.
She was told.
They caved.
She was told all sorts of things, as was Smotrich and others.
You know what really bothers me about this is they're talking about all this politics, and yet you got this guy wearing his talit. He's wearing, you know, the Jewish headset there. He got all these religious books behind him. You shouldn't be mixing all this for the religious stuff. There's a point and a place for worshiping God, and there's a point in handling holy things, and then there's a place and a point for handling secular things like war. And the two never mix. Okay? You didn't have King David running around the temple. That was the place of the priest. You didn't have the priest running around the court telling King David how he should prosecute the war. That was a place of men. So when you get to a situation like this, it's no different than when you have these crazies with Hamas. You just end up with religious crazies in Israel, and not much difference between them and Hamas.
Most of those things, if not all of those things, were lies.
Complete.
Just as, for example, what we were told just a few days ago by Netanyahu, and only a fool would believe Netanyahu. We were told a few days ago that we allow fuel into Gaza because to prevent an outbreak of some kind of disease or plague or what have you. Well, you know, pull the other one. And it was necessary to have 60,000 liters of fuel per day to run the sanitation system. So there won't be an outbreak of, I don't know, cholera or some other disease. And now all of a sudden it's 150,000 liters. So wait a second, if it was just 60,000 for that system, why now 150,000? Obviously, right. It was obviously a lie, but right. Many people still find it difficult to believe that Netanyahu is a liar, that all of our leaders and military leaders and political leaders, most of them certainly are liars,
which they are,
and incompetent, and
which
many
they
people
are.
Refuse to believe that. Now, someone like Orit Struk, who is very
wow, it's really interesting because so if Pollard is separating himself from Likud and Netanyahu, who fought for years to get him out of prison to make deals, and now he's separating himself from the religious Zionists, who the hell does he have? He's isolated himself. Wow.
No doubt, very well intentioned.
All right, so that's enough of that right there. See, 423. Hold on one second. All right, so I was looking at that video, and it's got this Mechon Shiloh. So I want to know what that is. So let's take a look. And there's that guy right there, David Bar Hayim. It says, who heads the Shiloh Institute, Mechon Shiloh, a Jerusalem-based rabbinical court and institute of Jewish education dedicated to the Torah of Israel. Oh, God. And he's from Sydney, Australia. All right. Let's see. He studied Yosef Kapak. He lives in Nevi Daniel. Yeah, Gush Etzion. That's where all the crazies are. Bar Hayim has proposed the reestablishment of the customs of Israel, religious observance and practice that reflect those of the pre-exile Jewish community in Israel. So you've got a revisionist here, rather than those of Babylon or Europe. So what he's saying, oh wow, this is real extremist. So he wants to reestablish the temple. He's against rabbinical Judaism, is what he's against. Yeah, wow, this guy is definitely out there. So rabbinical Judaism is what almost all of Judaism is based on today. It's an evolutionary point that we got to. He wants to go back to the temple days, sacrificing goats and shit like that. And he's another one of these Noahidic guys that think, well, these are the laws for the Gentiles that they have to obey, which they often seem to forget to consult the Gentiles whether they want to obey those rules. Yeah, he's another nut. So he's got his own court and his own followers. So they're trying to split Judaism from and go back to the days of the temple Judaism. It's just it's no different than, you know, the old days of the Sadducees, which were the temple priest people, and then the Pharisees, which were the rabbinical beginning of the rabbinical type Judaism. Let's see. The process of conversion to Judaism should be one that welcomes sincere converts and allows them to right to choose a rabbi and community which they identify with. Oh, I don't know. This guy might be a moderate. Who knows? One may eat poultry followed by dairy without a waiting period. Wow. Holy crap. Woo. You talk about, wow. That's a serious one. Married women should wear a head covering that is not a wig, since a wig is an invalid form of head covering. Well, that's more reasonable. Yeah, but how do you convince the other Orthodox Jews to stop doing that? So that's interesting. Okay. So let me see here. Hold on one second. All right, so this is one of the first news stories that came out about Jonathan Pollard. It's dated 21 November 1985. Let's see, when was he arrested? Yeah, November 21, 1985, he and his wife tried to escape to the Israeli embassy near Washington, D.C. They were followed by the FBI cars, and the Israelis, they had made their way through the gate. Security stopped them. They were on the radio. A guy came to the window. They must have called back to Israel, and they rejected them. It made them leave, and then after they were forced to leave, they were arrested by the FBI. All right, so it says a civilian employee of the Navy's investigative service was charged Thursday with espionage and theft of government property, and sources said he claimed connections with the Israeli government. The FBI said Jonathan J. Pollard, 31, was arrested in Washington based on charges filed in federal complaint before U.S. Magistrate Patrick Aldridge. The investigation was conducted by the FBI and Naval Investigative Services. The FBI said if convicted, Pollard could receive a sentence to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, or both. The FBI would not comment on reports Pollard had connections to a foreign government, specifically Israel, but sources who asked to remain anonymous said the reports were true. CBS News, quoting unnamed Justice Department sources, said Pollard has claimed he passed secrets to the Israelis in exchange for money. Pollard, who has worked for the Naval Investigative Service for 1 year, reportedly was arrested outside the Israeli embassy and charged with retention of classified documents, part of the espionage law, and theft of government property to be used to the advantage of another country. He was held without bail. An Israeli embassy spokesman told CBS, "We are aware that someone was detained in front of the embassy. We have no further knowledge." Yeah, right. CBS said Pollard is described as having stolen a broad range of information. There is no official comment, but CBS quotes sources saying the subject is so sensitive, top administration officials were involved in drawing up the charges. So, at his arraignment, the government reportedly charged Pollard was in possession of a substantial amount of money, that it obtained possession of the suitcase with Pollard's name on it on 19 November, that had been passed from Pollard's wife to a third party, and that Pollard stated to federal agents the suitcase contained highly classified documents and information related to the national defense that he had passed to agents of a foreign government. So wow, see, that's the first one right there. One of the first news stories. So what a total dick, a total fucking traitor. All right, now this is a declassified assessment of the damage done by, I think, the FBI and the Navy Department from release of the documents by Pollard. So when you have classified documents, you have to go, and there's been some kind of espionage involved, you have to go through and figure out what this guy had potentially had his hands on. So what they do is, whenever you check out a classified document, you have to sign for that document, okay? So they would go back through the log and pull any documents that he had access to. And then they would hand that over to an assessment team who could go through and try to figure out what's been damaged, what he potentially gave to a foreign adversary or a foreign intelligence service. And then from that, you can know where your damage assessment is at. So let's say you've got a procedures manual on how to deal with whatever. Okay? Well, now you're going to have to go through, if potentially that manual is out on the market for anyone to get, now you're going to have to go through and reassess everything that you put in that manual and what you're doing, because now the enemy potentially knows exactly what your procedures are. If this happens, you're going to do that. If that happens, you're going to do this. Okay? So we'll say if someone is arrested for spying by the Soviets, the embassy intelligence staff will be contacted, and they would communicate through according to the manual, through a certain radio frequency or a way of communicating that had happened. Well, if you know that that's the procedure and you're the enemy, you're going to monitor that station, and then you would know the importance of the person that you have, okay? Because now you know by listening that they're communicating about that person. It's very, very complicated, but the average citizen wouldn't be able to appreciate the damage that would be done. Only someone that's involved in the intelligence community that knows about this type of information would know how much damage is done. Okay, this used to be top secret from the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. This is dated 30 October 1987. The Jonathan Pollard espionage case, a damage assessment. Warning, notice intelligence sources and methods involved. Now you see how they've gone through and they've blocked out a lot of stuff, because a lot of stuff that was used back then is still used today. Types of procedures and methods. I mean, it's like this. If you wash a car a certain way, washing that car in 1985 is going to be almost the same way as it is in 2023. Not much difference. All right, the study undertaken by the Foreign Denial and Deception Analysis Committee at the direction of the Director of Central Intelligence is one of two assessments of damage undertaken as a result of Jonathan Pollard's espionage on behalf of Israel during 1984-85, which are being issued almost simultaneously. The other is an assessment prepared for the Department of Defense by the Office of Naval Intelligence and the National Investigative Service, National Security Investigative Command, where Pollard was employed during his espionage career. The principal drafters consulted closely during preparation of the two studies, although they differ somewhat in detail and emphasis. there is mutual agreement concerning their findings. So apparently we didn't learn anything from what happened with Pollard, and we committed the same damn mistakes when it came to Chelsea Manning. And Chelsea Manning had a certain type of clearance, but was able to access classified databases across the board, not just in Afghanistan, not just in the Army, not just in the military, CIA, NSA, all these files. And she downloaded all these files and on a thumb drive and gave them to who did she give them to? That guy in Russia. And of course, once she gave them to that guy in Russia, part of his, I guess, agreement to stay in Russia is to share every and anything that he knows. So the Russians automatically got whatever intelligence Chelsea Manning handed over to that guy in Russia. Anyway, the study director gratefully acknowledges the valuable assistance and of contributors from throughout the intelligence community to the project. Jonathan Pollard's short but intensive espionage career on behalf of Israel lasted from June of 1984 until his arrest on 21 November 1985. And see, if the scary thing, I guess we have to count our blessings about Jonathan Pollard, is that if he had actually been trained in procedures and what to do and wasn't a complete bum and a slob, he could have gone on for years and would have been unnoticed, like Aldrich Ames and that Hansen guy at the FBI. And God knows how much damage he could have done. Anyway, we keep going. It said, he pled guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage on 5 June 1986 and was sentenced to life imprisonment on 4 March 1987. Following his guilty plea, which arose from a plea bargain, Pollard cooperated with U.S. government investigators, including officials of the intelligence community. Extensive post-plea debriefings of Pollard, aided by Blank, a review of document receipt records, yielded an extensive account of Pollard's espionage objectives, activities, and comprised documents. A series of polygraph interviews tended to confirm that his cooperation with the U.S. authorities was bona fide. So he agreed to cooperate by giving interviews of all the documents that he had access to and why he had gone for those documents. Now, the Israelis had given him a shopping list. Okay? They wanted to know about certain things. Now, we don't have access to all that because a lot of that is classified. But it wasn't like he just gave them a couple of things to the Israelis that he could find. They gave him a shopping list of specific items to go hunting for. And that's exactly what he did. And for that, he was paid very well to bring them the product they were looking for. Okay? All right. So we're going to stop right here and pick this up next time.